So now I gotta work on getting some air to feed this turbo with. So this side on the log manifold that I bought off of eBay came with a V-band and some accessories so that you can put a hot side connection to the other side. What I don't have though is any way to hook a pipe up or any sort of exhaust tubing from this side to go back underneath the motor to tie into that turbo there. So this is just a 5.3 cast iron truck exhaust manifold. So what I'm planning to do is what I've seen a lot of guys do is just cut this off here and then use a 2.5 inch V-band clamp and weld it to this cast steel. It's actually not cast iron, it's cast steel. So a lot of guys have no problem welding these things on and having years of good use out of them. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this off of here, and I'm just going to take the bandsaw and lop this off, and we'll kind of just hope for the best. And so I'm sure there's like 40 ways you could go about doing this, but I happen to have this swag off-road table and a Milwaukee portasaw. So I'm just going to use this to run this manifold through here. Hopefully it goes underneath. So next step is just take this V-band clamp and take the 1/2 out of it that we're going to use. It looks like it won't quite fit inside of this diameter here, but it does line up pretty close around the outside diameter. So I'll just take a flap disc and go through and clean all this rusty junk off of here. And then I guess I can take this boss down a little bit too, so I don't need that to be in the way of me trying to weld around here. And then I'll either take the MIG or the TIG and go around and weld this flange on here. That at least looks like it's going to weld up really nicely. So just cleaning the metal up, there's a lot of smoke coming out of this old cast steel. I was afraid it was going to be really full of oil and stuff, but it looks like it's going to be okay. I'm just going to go around and tack the other side, and then I'll just put some filler around here and finish this weld. So pretty happy with how this turned out. It welded up super easily, nice and clean, even for an amateur guy like me. Okay, so the motor and trans in, turbo's on, turbo manifold's on. I'm gonna go ahead and try to make or complete the hot side. So right now I've got this turbo manifold off eBay on this side. I've just got that cast iron 5.3 or cast steel 5.3 manifold on the driver's side with a flange welded onto it. So now I've got to connect those both together underneath the motor. So to do that, I'm just going to use some leftover 2.5 inch exhaust I had from when I built that X-pipe on the truck with the previous motor in it. So I'll show you what I got real quick. Okay, so I'm just going to make this out of 2.5 inch exhaust tubing, and it's just some scrap pieces I have left over. There's a U-bend that I had, looks like probably like a 8 inch radius, 6 inch radius, something like that on a piece of 2.5. This is probably 18 gauge, pretty thin stuff. I've got just a straight piece I had from a different project. Looks like what's left of a 90, so probably what's left of probably a 180. So we got close to 90 degrees left here. And then these are the two old exhaust muffler exits I had before. And I think if I remember correctly, this was just a U bend that I cut straight in half here and welded these two adapters onto to make them turn out of the mufflers. So what I'm going to do is just lop off these expander pieces I put on here and lop off these brackets, and then try to make this into some sort of a piece that connects those two sides. I also have this Amazon 2.5 inch flex joint. This is just a cheap Amazon piece here. So I'll go back in my purchase history and post a link to this as well. The important part with these is that you have the flex piece that has this flexible steel braid on the outside, but it does not have it on the inside. You see a lot of guys have horror stories that this flexible braiding stuff comes loose in here, and it all just like wads up into this thing that constricts the diameter of the tube, and they can't build boost and have all sorts of crazy issues. So these are pretty inexpensive and should allow for a little bit of flex in the system. Some guys argue you don't need them, whatever, they're cheap, I'm going to put one in. Okay, so here's where I'm at so far. Passenger side, obviously the starter is here to contend with, and so I just took the piece that I had, which is a little, I think it was like a 90, and I cut it in half to make it a 45 here on top, and so it turns down into a 45. And then there's a piece of this pipe, I think that had another like kind of longer 45 in it, and this was actually where the exhaust tip turned out with the last setup here, and so I just left it. And so once it tightens up, looks like it should give me plenty of clearance on the frame. It should kind of turn away from the starter so it doesn't heat the starter up too badly. And then my idea here is that this pipe will kind of turn back under the transmission, and I'll hit this center flex joint here. And then same for the driver's side. Is the driver's side again was just the old tip here that I kind of had a 45 on, and I kind of have it going back towards the rear of the vehicle so that I can put another 90 on it, which I think I'm gonna kind of set up like this with these two marks here, and so that'll turn it to go straight underneath the transmission. To put a small straight pipe in there, and then put that flex joint in the center. You know, so the flex joint will kind of mount here out of the way, so it's tucked up underneath the truck as much as I can. And then so I have to cut this passenger side pipe somewhere and do the same thing. I have to put some sort of a transition piece in it to kind of turn it back this way to get it to line up with this flex joint here on the opposite side. Okay, so here's where we're getting to. I put that 90 in here in this little section, and then I put a straight piece in here, and I tacked the flex joint in. So I'm got it set up to this point. So now I've got to figure out how to tie this piece into the flex joint. So somehow I've got to cut this piece somewhere and then use like a 90 and maybe another, I don't know, maybe this 90, and try to figure out how to make this tie into here. It looks like this piece might actually work out pretty good if we just kind of slice it down and then try to tie it into this. Okay, so I'm just kind of like had to keep sneaking up on this. So what I did is I just put a little bit longer section of straight in here and use that same 90 I had before. And what I ended up having to do is it's going to kind of sit straight like this, but ended up having to kind of put an extra spacer in my my pipe here to kind of make everything fit. So it has a turn and has a straight section in it, and then it kind of has the original section I had coming out of the manifold there. So anyway, it looks like it's going to fit up nice, not have any binding or anything now. So what I'll do now is go ahead and mark this in place where I want it, and then tack it and test fit it back on the truck one last time. And if everything fits well, then I'll take it off and take it over to the bench and finish weld everything up real nice. And the hot side will be finished on this thing. So there it is, all final welded. Actually turned up pretty smooth and has a nice clean radius to it and stuff. I just used some silicone bronze to go through and finish these welds out. It's funny, it still has like the original welds from that exhaust system in a couple places that look kind of ratty. But all in all, it just makes a nice crossover pipe or U-pipe to connect those two manifolds together, has the flanges on the end of it. And it's actually surprising with that flex joint in there, it actually moves around more than I thought it would. So with that, we'll call this piece done, and we'll get on to doing the downpipe. All right, and so to finish the hot side, well, this is the exhaust side. Not technically the hot side, maybe it is, but clearly I don't know what I'm doing. This is the part that's going to exit the turbo, and this is all the excess gas that's not using anymore that it puts out the back of the truck somewhere else. So to do that, I ordered some 4-inch tubing from Jegs. This is just some Jegs Universal Straight 4-inch exhaust tubing. I think it's like an 18 gauge. This is like the thinnest stuff you can get, but it's pretty massive. So I got a piece of straight, which is I think 4 feet long, so 4x4. And then I bought this U-bend that they have, which they were courteous enough to just stick a FedEx label on and send to me. Oh, thing's nasty. So what it has is the U-bend on one side and kind of a 45 on the other side. So my hope is that this gives me enough bends to go ahead and complete the system. And I kind of show you what my plan is for this universal pipe real quick. So I think the experts actually call this a downpipe. This is a 4-inch pipe that's going to leave the back of the turbo, and it's attached via a big V-clamp here, and then it's going to go out beside the engine and down underneath the truck and on out the back somewhere to exit the exhaust safely. So my plan is to do this just like you see on the side of other guys that do these Silverado swaps and stuff. Is this big piece of 4-inch will just kind of run back here next to the valve cover, and then it'll turn down into that black hole to go nowhere, and hopefully have enough clearance that it won't hit anything and burn anything up. So to get a real rough idea of how to start this thing and like kind of where to cut this piece of pipe, I think I want to use this 45 coming straight off the turbo. So I just got a piece of TIG rod. You could use anything for this, a piece of like Romex copper or something, but I just put a 45 in it, and that way it represents the angle of the pipe here. And I can use that to kind of roughly mock up the center of where I think this thing's gonna fall, and just kind of hold this piece of rod and move it around here, and say, you know, if I got a 45-degree bend and there's roughly 2 inches on each side of it, do I have enough clearance? And so I just kind of hold this in the center of the turbo exit where the downpipe's going to go, and kind of try to figure out, like, yeah, I think it's probably a good place to start about here. So from this point to the end of the turbo, I'm just going to roughly say is 9.5 inches or so. So I might cut it at 10 and a half, just to give myself a little bit of extra room there. It's always easier to cut more pipe off than it is to weld the big pieces back on. So then if I think this part's going to go down next to the transmission, maybe it'll come this way from the bend. So, you know, roughly that 10, 11 inch mark somewhere in here. And that way I kind of give myself a little bit of extra pipe to cut off. So I can start off, if I cut it here, this is kind of like, this looks like it's about 11 inches now from my center line. And we're thinking, we might need somewhere in the neighborhood of like 9.5, somewhere in here. So maybe we'll kind of put a mark at 9.25. And we'll just see how close we get to having an accurate measurement here. But for now, I'll just lop this off, and then that leaves me a full U-bend to start to make other bends, as this thing has to kind of snake its way around and out. That is some massive and awkward stuff to work with. So we either need a steeper angle on this 45, or we're gonna have to shorten this tube here to get closer to our 9 inches, and kind of let this whole piece come forward and tilt up a little bit more. All right, so it fits pretty good in here now. I just kind of kept sneaking up on it, and got it to where it clears nicely and all that sort of stuff. What I ended up doing was kind of taking an angled cut off the front of this here. So I took less off the top and more off the bottom. So when it fit against the turbo, it actually fits at more of a downward type angle. And I kind of took the belt grinder to sneak up on it to kind of put a compound miter on it to actually take more off the inside, so when it bolted up to the back of the turbo again, it went not only down, but towards the center line of the truck, like where the transmission is. So what I'm going to do is kind of clock it where I want it, and then take the MIG welder and just tack it in place in a couple spots, and then I'll have to raise the truck up in the air and get up underneath it and try to figure out where to go from here. So we can see here that piece of 4-inch comes down, but then it's shooting right on top of that truck frame rail there. So it's gonna have to like take a little jog towards the transmission center line and then back towards the frame rail again, so it kind of makes a little S bend there, and then have to come back along the side of the frame rail and go over. There's a crossover kind of just out of frame here, but from underneath here you can see it's got some clearance against that last coil wire there. It's not touching anything, it's all free floating. And then the end of the pipe is not touching the cab of the truck or anything. So I think what I'll do is just kind of make a mark here and kind of guess where I want to start this jog in the pipe, and say I want to probably start it somewhere around here. So I'll cut the pipe off and I'll cut a bend out. So back of the bandsaw, I just shortened this pipe a little bit. So this end here is the end we're seeing underneath the truck that's pointing down towards the frame rail. And so I just shortened it back up to kind of where that mark was. And now I need to put some sort of a turn on here to turn this back towards the transmission. So to do that, I'm going to start with this 180 bend, and I'm going to plan on using this first part of the bend here as our first bend. And what I'm going to do is just kind of eyeball the amount of angle I want with a zip tie and think, and look at that and say, I think an angle kind of like that will start a good first bend over, and then we'll have to S back, of course. So what I'm going to do is just take a Sharpie and just trace the zip tie. It gives us a nice cut line to follow. So I'm going to plan on using this piece here, and then I'm going to guess I'm going to cut it, you know, somewhere through here to kind of shorten it up. This will be the first turn in the S. So the idea here is you guys can see this outside the truck real quick, the part that comes down towards the frame, and then we're going to start this this S bend here. So it'll turn it back. I guess it'll go this way. It'll turn it back towards the transmission, like this somewhere, and then of course you can kind of clock that this way, a little more bend, a little less bend, whatever you want to do. So I'll put this pipe back in the truck and kind of see what it looks like here. Alright, not the best camera angle here, but you can see where the pipe is. So this is the that turn that I cut is this section here. I cut one more turn, which is this next closest weld joint you see, and so it allows that pipe to make a turn and run out the back of the truck here. This is just the frame rail on the side. It's going to kind of go back and go over the rear transmission cross mount back there. And get tie into this next piece of pipe. I kind of got just hanging with some tie wire and some other stuff here, and go out the back. So here's where we are so far. You can see the little piece in the center here that I cut out, which you guys saw me cut this on the bandsaw. And this is just a straight section where it just starts to turn. And then same thing here. I just took the other side of it and cut that off and put it together, so you can see now that you're looking down it. See if we can get a good camera angle here. So you can see where it comes out of the turbo here, and then it makes the 45 to start the downturn, and then that piece we cut starts this kind of this S shape to go over towards the transmission and then back out towards the back end of the truck back there. What I'm going to do now is try to figure out how to connect this offset gap joint I got going. Alright, it's not the easiest thing to show on camera, but what I'm going to do to just kind of fill in this offset gap. So this pipe here is starting out that it's pointing, and it's kind of running downhill, and then this pipe is actually more inbound and towards the center line of the truck, so I have to kind of make this jog that jogs back up and around the transmission pan here, but then kind of goes towards the center line of the truck and then S's back to this exit pipe back here. So what I've done is just taken a a piece of that bend and kind of cut it to where it's longer on one end and shorter on the other. And I think if I kind of put that here or so, you can see it starts to turn the pipe back around like towards the transmission and back up towards this this pipe we need to turn it to, and then we need to kind of carry that on. I got a piece of like 5.5 inch straight here, and I'm just gonna stack that on the end. Again, I'm sorry about the bad camera work here. Oh, I don't know. This, it gets me, I've only got to fill in this one last pie gap here. And so to do that, I'm just gonna cut out like another one of these type shapes here and kind of just keep cutting on it and grinding on it and cut and grind some more until it fills in that little pie gap we were just looking at. So to start, what I'm gonna do is just take these two pieces where I have these two marks and take those over to the bench with the TIG welder and just tack these together so I don't have to hold it, because it's pretty cumbersome to hold. It keeps wanting to just fall apart in my hand. And so here's that section of the downpipe. So I just took some silicone bronze and welded up all the joints on this thing to make kind of a nice little low heat type weld. I've had good luck with it doing tube and stuff in the past, and it comes out looking pretty nice. So obviously the turbo flange here, and then the rest of it's going to go on out the back. So I'll have to divide the system somewhere back there and like put a 4-inch slip joint on the thing so I can take the system on and off the car, on and off the truck if I ever need to. Well, I'm sure I'm going to need to. So whenever I need to. Anyway, I'm gonna put this thing back on for hopefully one final time here, and we'll call this piece finished.